Hello and howdy, Fearless Schools podcast listening audience. It's Dr. Drew Tomlin, educator of many years, current middle school principal, and as always, for this wonderful podcast brought to you by Creative Leadership Solutions, I have the honor of being your host and listening concierge. And also joining in is the always fearless and never feckless Director of Professional Learning at CLS, Dr. Ann McCarty. How are things going, Dr. Ann?
Super excited, Drew. We get to talk to one of my favorite former colleagues this evening, and I can't wait to hear her story.
Oh, same here. I can't wait to see and hear what's on her mind. And speaking of minds, yes, we're about to embark on a delightful journey into the mind of an educational leader and superhero who has been there and done that, and in fact keeps on doing that, never takes a break. And as part of the Fearless School Shorts podcast, we'll be digging into our guest's origin story to find out where she came from in the wild, wide world of pedagogy, because every superhero has an origin story. For example, that guy, the Flash, was just a regular science dude working in a lab when he got struck by lightning and got that super speed. So how did our guest get struck by the bolt of educational wonderment and become the superhero she is today? Well, let's find out the answer and more, shall we? So this person brings nearly 3 decades, count them 3, of experience to the field of education, having served as both a teacher and leader across all levels. She is a published author with ASCD, including 4 current books and a forthcoming 5th title, Trusted, Trust Pillars, Trust Killers, and The Secret to Successful Schools, expected in the summer of 2025. Woo! She has contributed hundreds of articles to numerous educational publications. She is actively involved in professional development, offering her expertise to school districts in areas such as school climate, personnel management, and instructional leadership. She is also a frequent presenter at major educational conferences, including those hosted by ASCD, NAESP, NASSP, AASA, and various state and national organizations. Oh my gosh, that's a mouthful. She shares her insights as the co-host of the widely listened to, you got to check it out, it's called Principal Matters Podcast, and as an instructor in educational administration at The Ohio State University. Go Bucks. Currently, she serves as a deputy superintendent in Ohio. Welcome to the Fearless School Shorts podcast, Dr. Jen Schwanke. How's it going?
Hi, it's going well. Thank you for that wonderful intro. I sound very busy.
You are.
Do you sleep?
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, that begs the most important question of the podcast, which is all about sustenance. How do you do all this work? What is your favorite food to keep you going?
Oh, well, that's a no-brainer. My favorite food is blueberries. I know that sounds ridiculous.
No. It's not ridiculous. Let's go there.
And there is actually a story behind it. So I grew up in a very, very rural area, and every July we would go down to the blueberry patch that was run by Bus Olmsted, and they had rows and rows of blueberries, and we would pick them till our fingers fell off.
Wow.
And then we would freeze them, and we'd eat them all winter. But I just love blueberries. I love them. It's bizarre at how much I love them.
No, listen, anything that we're passionate about to other people is going to be bizarre. So just, let your freak flag, blueberry flag fly.
Yep.
Now, do you eat the blueberries with anything in particular, or you just throw them in?
No, it's you guys, you know how when you go to the movies and you eat popcorn and you try to be dainty and eat like one piece and then another, and then you find yourself like scarfing it in your mouth and the pieces fall out? That's me with blueberries. It's disgusting. I try to have manners, but with blueberries, I just have them in my mouth like popcorn.
That's lovely. And yes, embrace your blueberry essence. Listen, blueberries clearly are a part of your past and your origin story. So let's just go there, right? What kind of a student were you besides a blueberry eating kid? and perhaps who helped you learn and become a learner?
Right. Well, like all of us, I'm sure there's many people that I could give a shout out. But again, I grew up on a farm in a very poor rural area, and we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And so that's very normal when you're a kid. Mm-hmm. But looking back, a poor rural community like that has a lot of wonderful, caring people in it. And one of the people that was wonderful to me was my 3rd grade teacher, Miss Troutman.
Oh, lovely.
I think things were really bad. I think, financially they were really bad. I think I looked and acted hungry. And one day the teacher asked me to stay behind, and she shared her sandwich with me with just, grace and kindness and, not a shred of anything that would hurt my dignity. And I've written about that before, actually, in an article for ASCD, and it was called Every Child a Firecracker, because she called me a firecracker. And I thought that was the
Mm.
best compliment that could be bestowed on anyone.
Yeah.
I had a lot of caring teachers and never in my wildest dreams thought of being a teacher ever. That was not
Mm.
at
Mm.
all what I wanted to do. So I went off to college and graduated early. And I'm, 21 years old and have no idea what I'm going to do with this English degree. So I bartended for 3 great years.
Nice.
And I say great because they were a lot of fun, but also because I truly believe that gave me a lot of my people skills. I always say if you can throw a drunk dude out of a bar, you can talk to an angry parent. It built confidence in working with people and interacting with people. And so at that point, I
Yeah.
went back to graduate school and got my teaching license, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, no, gosh, there's so much cool, ingredients in this recipe already, like going back to Miss Troutman sharing her sandwich with you. What did that, I mean, take yourself back there. Like, what did that mean to you? And how does that help you with what you do now when you work with staff and all that and kids?
Well, I think what it taught me, not with this level of clarity. When you're 8 years old,
Mm,
all you know is that the sandwich was delicious, right? And the teacher
right.
was kind.
Yeah.
One of my true guiding philosophies is be nice. And I know there's teachers out there, be kind. You never know what kind of story people have. And it's so incredibly
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I was a very well loved child. My parents adored us all. There were four of us growing up on this organic farm. My dad had very 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 high standards for us, but also we had to literally go out and pick up rocks. So the work was hard, money was tight, and teachers were kind. And to me, that's everything.
Right.
So when I kind of unpack who I am and that it led me into education, I'm not surprised at all.
Hmm.
A teacher saying to a child, wow, this piece of writing is really incredible, matters so much more than whether the writing is incredible.
Mm,
The teacher that says, wow, I heard you were great at your track meet last night, again, matters much more than the time you ran. And so I think that, public education has taken a huge hit in recent years. And I think it's because, one or two bad apples of teachers make us all look bad. But we can never forget how many people are there for the right reasons. And
mm,
that's what drew me to leadership, to be quite honest. I had taught 7 years and really just had a pull to go lead. And I had, like many of us did, I had
yeah.
principal tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, you really should try this. And I said, oh my God, never, I'll never be a principal. And then boom, there I found myself doing that. And what I try always to remember myself is, every child is somebody's baby.
Hmm.
You have to dig really deep some days to have that kindness. But I saw it in my own life.
Yeah.
And I just give it back and give it back and give it back.
Yeah. You like always have a metaphorical sandwich in your pocket ready to share with someone.
I think too, I'm so sorry, Doctor. And I think it's so easy to go overboard. And I'm going to
Mm,
be careful with my words here, but it's easy to go overboard with assumptions about children and wanting to be a savior. And I think my sandwich story was not so Miss Troutman could go in the lounge and say, boy, that little girl just needed my sandwich. Aren't I a savior?
right.
It was not
Right.
that at all. It was, hey, stay and have lunch with me. And I never felt like I was there, to be saved.
Right.
I think she just kind of liked me and it felt really good to be liked. So
Yeah.
I think that's what children need. So yeah, and I cut you off.
No, you're hitting my point exactly, which the words that you said, I think, Jen, were dignity.
Mm,
She shared her sandwich with you with dignity. She asked you to stay for lunch, and you, as a young child, were none the wiser. You're like, yeah, I'll stay with the teacher.
Right.
She calls me firecracker. I would define you as firecracker too, as well. And I would also say, having worked with Jen, dignity is a thing for you.
mm,
There's never a question when you're interacting with you that you don't respect the people that you're working with and showing them that same helping them feel that same way that teacher did for you.
Well, that's right. And I do try to do that. We all have biases, right? And we all have assumptions, and we absolutely have to stop them sometimes because, we see this all the time with Black and brown children. We assume that their household is a certain way because we saw it in some movie somewhere.
hmm.
And that's so not true. Again, I can't emphasize enough. My parents didn't have any money, but boy, the love was abundant, and they worked so hard. And so,
Right.
I was always so embarrassed about my dirty socks and my dirty pants. I just felt like, I
Hmm.
was a farm kid. And I was very, very embarrassed by that. but I never felt judged. I felt like it was okay to be whatever it was that I brought. And I would have been mortified if Miss Troutman's like, honey, can I
Right.
give you, take your pants to wash them? Not that she would have, but there's a way we can help kids and see that, let them know they're seen without making it very clear we've made a judgment that, and all judgments honestly are based on our own lifestyles, right? They're based on what we have built or what we expect for ourselves. But when we put those judgments on anybody else, it's deeply unfair because we know a fraction
Right.
of the story.
Right. And also, I see, from working at the bar and having those people skills, like that helps out too, right? Because people who step up to the bar, they've got their stories and they order what they order. But like when you take the time to know who they are as
Well,
people,
yeah, I would never want to tell everybody to go bartend a year before teaching, but it's actually not good advice because, a lot of things. First of all, stamina, endurance. When you have to be nice to the 400th person that asks you for another bar napkin.
yep,
When you have to say to someone, that's enough. We're
Mhm.
done. You need to leave now.
Yep.
When we, see someone who just needs a sandwich and just needs a drink and just to have a moment, to be able to read people and what they're putting out in the universe and give them what they need. It really was a lot of on the job
Yeah, I
training.
mean,
I never thought about how my experience probably made me better at that, but
reading people, right? Like so much of
Mhm.
what we do is literacy, be it actual like textual literacy or behavioral literacy. Like how do we read situations and people, and then how do we respond? Receptive literacy and yeah, expressive literacy. I think that's really cool. I was a cook in the back of the kitchen. They wouldn't let me at the front of the house.
Oh, but see, let's just tell our listeners right now that the guys cooking in the back and the bartenders were very good friends because I would, listeners, air quote, mess up some milkshakes
Oh,
for the cooks who would make me smothered chicken for dinner. Oops, mistake. So we would take the orders informally and then take care of one another. So
yeah,
it's all teamwork. See, there's learning in that too.
that's right. That's right. So listen, besides sandwiches and Miss Troutman and blueberries, and obviously the passion that you feel for working with students and staff and everything like that, what else brings you joy, or what educational innovations make you excited about where we're headed with teaching and learning? What gets your superhero cape flying?
Well, everybody's talking about AI. Everybody's panicking about AI. And I do not know where it's going. And I certainly don't want this conversation to be about AI. But what I am excited about is how this is going to change us as learners. I think, writing as a skill, which has always been something I'm passionate about, love doing it,
Mm-hmm.
love that. It's going to change. It has changed. But what we're going to need to make sure we're doing is ensuring people can read. Because if a computer can churn out writing, and it does beautifully, we need to make sure we can read said writing so that it actually, in fact, says what we want it to say, and then interpret it and implement whatever that content is. The second thing that excites me is I believe that there's going to be more need than ever for creativity,
Mm.
for original thought, and perhaps most importantly of all, arts and human connection.
Yeah.
So this, as a country, we have been banging on the STEM drum for a long time, and I don't want to be misunderstood. I think that's important. But a lot of artists, creative types, innovators, original thinkers have been marginalized for many years. And I can't wait for the child who can make, write, develop, engineer something new that AI couldn't do.
Yes.
And I also think, I went to the dentist today. You guys, I cracked a tooth.
Oh,
and
no.
I can't, because I always think, ugh. And so I went and I said to my dentist, I'm freaking out. And she's like, she put her hand on my arm and she said, I got you. AI can't do that. And I said that to her. I said, Dr. Montgomery, all I needed was you to say that. AI can't make people feel better. They can't reassure. They can't, AI might someday fix a tooth, but they're not going to have the ability to have human connection.
Right.
So to answer your question with all of those words, say humanity is going to have to be better than ever so that we all turn into robots and spreadsheet analysts.
Right. Oh,
it's going to change us, and I'm excited. Bring on the artists.
There you go. I'm gonna roll that back because that was some of the most profound stuff I've heard in a long time. Humanity has to be better.
Yep.
That's, oh my gosh, that's like a mic drop moment. That reading is more critical than ever.
Right.
Creativity and originality, the arts, human connection, original thinking.
Right.
Oh, okay. That's it. Those are the 23rd century, 22nd century things that we need. Whew.
Well, and we were talking before we started recording about the importance of instructional leadership, and every school leader wants to be a strong instructional leader, right? So I think we have to think, well, wait, what does that mean? It does mean do a whole bunch of stuff so they can take a test. The English teacher in me is going to spout out some stats now, which is kids are reading, you guys. They're reading 100,000 words a day.
Yeah.
They're just 150 character or word blocks.
Yeah.
So we can be mad about that, and we can say all we want. Kids need to read Lord of the Flies. We can say that. But this generation is not pining for a good long afternoon with The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. They're not. There's some things we're going to have to let go. There is a place for those humanities to be studied deeply and to have those experts. But in terms of the teenagers that are coming to us, the littles, the mediums, the older kids, we have to recognize their world is different. And so what worked for us in 1990 when we were getting trained, or 2000 or whatever, we're going to have to evolve.
Yeah.
And I think there's space for it. I'm not scared. I just think it's going to require us to be very different in what we value and how we value it.
Yeah, some people, and I'll own this a little bit too. I'm nervous about the story going forward. And I think part of it is because I keep holding on to the story of the past and how I experienced learning as a student and into high school and college. And quite frankly, I do see students who learn in those 150 characters or very short things. And I get nervous about like their stamina and their resilience, and that kind of, are they really dealing with complex thinking? So yeah, maybe I need to kind of take a back seat and question myself. What does it mean to be an instructional leader in a new era with a new generation? My fear is that artificial intelligence, and again, we don't want to camp on this forever, but artificial intelligence will become superficial intelligence. Like how do we stop that from happening, or is that just a ghost story that I'm chasing?
Right. Well, I think you're so wise to ask those questions.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's very wise.
Wise, thank you.
And don't let him get a big head now that I've called him. But those questions do have to be answered. But we also have to remember that since the earth cooled, the older generation has been worried about the younger generation. It has always been that way. And the younger generation always makes fun of the older ones. Like they're all now love to say, "Oh, boomer move." This is just history repeating itself. My doctoral work was actually on this very subject. The Ohio State University let me do kind of a hybrid study, and it was the history of public education. So even back in 1600. Guess what was happening? The older generation was saying, the world's going to hell. We're going to have to, this is all a mess. And they've been saying that now for, 425 years. And so we have to keep that in mind for a little bit of perspective. The other thing that I've learned and we need to remember is a nation reflects its anxieties and its fears on its schools. So whenever there's a hard time in a society, name it. Great Depression, World War I, World War II, Civil Rights Movement. When that daggone A Nation at Risk came out and scared everybody half to death about education. Whenever something like that happens, an antecedent to everybody attacking school. It happens like clockwork. And that's where we are right now. So everybody's going, oh my God, what are the schools doing? What are the principals doing? What are the teachers doing? We got to be safe. It's the same story. It's repeated itself over and over and over.
Right. Oh my goodness gracious. So, Jen, you've talked about, some of the superpowers that help you do your work, right? Like your insight, your passions for the work that you do, going all the way back to, Miss Troutman in that third grade class and the sandwich and the blueberries. So with the superpowers, every superhero has like a kryptonite that challenges their work. So as an educational superhero, what's your kryptonite? What challenges you to the point of, it's just hard?
Mine is a very internal job, so to speak. I worry. I've always been a worrier. I get very anxious, and I can make little problems big ones in my mind. Okay. What I aspire to be, how I aspire to make this kryptonite gone from my world forever and ever, is I want to be a leader that is calm and absolutely confident that we got it. And I'm usually like that with others. I'm not like that with myself because there's always this fear. And I think you two probably feel it. I think every school leader feels it. What if I'm the reason this whole thing is a mess? What if I fail? And I find myself counseling and working through, and I do some executive coaching and I tell people, you got this.
Yeah.
Where's your fear coming from? And then I go home and I deal with it. This is a field that's very hard to have confidence without arrogance. It's hard to have humility without, what's the word, kind of handicapped by our insecurities and indecision. It's hard to find that balance. Nobody wants somebody whose ego is so big it precedes them and walk into a room.
Right.
But you also don't want someone meek and scared. So for all leaders, I think that's the balance. How do I lead with confidence? Yes. How do I know that I know my stuff, but yet have that door wide open to always learning and growing and getting better and learning from those things that keep you up at night?
Right. How do I walk into a room with a bowl full of fresh blueberries, but not keep them just to myself? I don't know. I'm just trying to make those connections.
How do I think the question too is, how do I lead these people and let them feel so as empowered as they needed to be, so that collective efficacy that our building is capable of doing anything? Yes. How do I do that without mandating it, demanding it, insisting upon it, saying, I know how to do this? How do you lead that with a shared mind?
Yeah, that is good.
So Jen, I'm gonna pull a little here. Don't you think it's about vulnerability? Like you said, we want creativity and we listen to our friend Brene Brown, and the heart of creativity comes from courage, which comes from vulnerability. Right. So we're a little off script here, Drew, but
it's all right. Go for it.
I think that's one of the hard things of being a female leader,
right?
Is vulnerability.
Well, yeah, I've thought an immense amount about this because I think vulnerability can easily be misunderstood as permission to be emotionally fragile publicly. I think you can be emotionally fragile all you want, but at the end of the day, and I might get pushback from this, if anybody's offended, go ahead, email me and we can argue about it. But I feel like it is a mistake to appear weak or fragile or scared, because I think people need their leader to be strong. I worked with a principal in another state. He was going through a tough personal thing. And he said, hey, will you read this email I'm going to send to my community? And I was like, Mayday, 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 don't send this. Please don't. Your community does not need to know that you're having a mental breakdown. You will never get that toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah.
No. You might want to send an email saying, I'll be out of town for 2 weeks, because people need their leader to be strong. That doesn't mean that we can't have really bad days or feel fragile, but we don't necessarily need to say, I'm a mess,
right.
Or I need help. So I think vulnerability, and to your point, I think vulnerability is critical, but it can't become our identity. It can't be, I'm going to cry at every staff meeting because I feel things so deeply. It needs to be part of who our essential soul is, and that people know they can be vulnerable with us, but it can't be, flying on a banner outside the school. And I know you didn't imply that. I just
no, I couldn't agree more, because and people can email me too if they want.
The emails are coming in right now, guys. Just want to let you know.
They are. We can feel them coming in. It's authenticity.
Exactly.
Right?
That's it. I love that word.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I feel and you said it, Jen, like when we're really authentic, that for me, that's being vulnerable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so in a staff meeting, if you're talking about something, a student, your own experience, whatever, and your voice shakes, that's authentic. That's real. You shouldn't apologize for that. If you're standing in front of your staff and you're talking about how maybe, something personal is going on, and you're then weeping and they're uncomfortable and they're like, somebody get her the tissues, like,
right.
That's no bueno, because they need their leader to be able to have the shaky voice and still lead, by goodness,
Yeah.
And so I think the vulnerability thing can be taken as a little bit too much of permission to make it about us. And leading is not about us.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Jen, maybe it goes back to the conversation before we started recording of, this isn't going to be my finest moment.
Right. Exactly. Right. You could say to a staff, hey, not my finest moment. I'm feeling the feels. And boy,
right.
here they are.
Yep.
But again, then I think authenticity and vulnerability, their opposite, so to speak, is self-discipline.
Mm.
Knowing when you need to say, you know what, now's not the time. I'm feeling vulnerable because I have to put my dog down, whatever. So I'm canceling the staff meeting. I'm going to press pause. I'm going to
Yeah.
discipline myself to not make this about me and take it away from the work we're trying to do.
I'm listening to everything you guys are saying and just soaking it all in, because I feel this every single day in the schoolhouse, where there's a little bit of, I think we all have imposter syndrome a little bit, like, oh my gosh, am I really meant to do this? But that your staff is looking for you to be, yes, you're one voice in the chorus. That's an expression that I think about all the time. You're one voice in the chorus, but at some point someone's going to ask you to sing solo. Someone's going to ask you to step up and do the thing that needs to be done and say the thing that needs to be said. And if you're not the one, then who is going to say it?
That's right. Right. I've said that before to principals that I mentor. You could never take the microphone away from Taylor Swift. She's going to have the microphone. She is born to lead.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, with principals or school leaders or whatever, take the mic. There are times that you have to run the concert. You have to do that. And people want strong leaders. They want people who are like, I got this. It's a whole thing. And, the imposter syndrome thing, I've thought a lot about that too. I do think there's more, and research shows certainly that women are much more vulnerable to the imposter syndrome. But I think it can either paralyze us with fear, or it can be a driver, because anxiety is just a call to action, right? And so if you're feeling anxiety about your role or was I really the best person for this job, you have to let that spur you into action. What do I need to learn to master this? Who do I need to have on my team?
Yep.
How can we have this collective belief in our school that we're all awesome and we can do this?
Right.
And use the imposter syndrome as a way to spur you into some sort of action. I always tell people, if you got hired in this job, you're the right person for the job. So put that nonsense behind.
Yeah.
Have faith in yourself as a leader, and you'll learn. Heck yeah, you'll learn.
Yeah. There's an expression that we've used quite a bit on this program and talking with folks like Anthony Muhammad and John Hattie, and the phrase psychological safety keeps coming up, whether directly or just implied. And this is one of those moments, and I think we talk about psychological safety and having a school environment that is psychologically safe so people can make mistakes. But I think sometimes the challenge with an educational leader is, at least I find it sometimes, is that how do you have those psychologically safe conversations with yourself? Like in those moments of self-doubt, you don't necessarily want to broadcast your trepidations to other people. So like, how do you navigate your own minefield that you've laid yourself?
Well, here's what I would say to that, Drew. The first question is, what evidence do you have that you messed it up? What evidence do you have that you weren't good enough?
Yeah.
This is not based on research, listeners. This is Jen Schwanke's rough math.
There you go.
I believe 25% of the people in your school are going to love you because you're the boss. They think you're great. Any decision you make, good. 25% of people can't stand you because you're the boss. They don't like bosses.
Yeah.
Whatever. Everything you do, it's stupid, should have been done differently. I wouldn't. And then I think 50% of the people are in the middle. And if you are making your judgment that you are a failure as a leader based on those 25% that got out of bed this morning mad at you, just because you have the master key, that's the only reason, then you have to discard that as irrelevant. That doesn't mean they're wrong, and it doesn't mean you don't listen to some feedback or whatever, but you absolutely can't use that for the barometer of your leadership success. You need to look at that 50%. Because they're the ones that are going to really like you if you're being a strong leader, and they're going to be kind of annoyed if you're not, but there's not going to be mutiny or anything.
Right.
So look at that 50%, see where they are. And then if you need an ego boost, go to the 25% that love you just because you came to work.
Yeah, you know where their classrooms are. Walk down the hall, go find them.
Right. But if our imposter syndrome is coming from that, the group of people who just don't like bosses, then, hear them, but don't make them your identity.
Right. And I guess it's important to remember that, from studying the history of public education, or really any organization, you're always going to have, whether it's a widget factory or a public schoolhouse, you're going to have that bell curve of the 25 extremes and the 50 in the middle. Goodness gracious. That's a great reminder. And I feel like I've had a personal therapy course right now.
I do. I tell principals that all the time. It's 25, 50, 25.
Yeah.
Where are you going to put your energy?
Right.
And then this is what they say to me.
Ooh.
Well, I have this one teacher and she's super toxic. She's a cancer to our building. So I'm like, okay, that's not your 25%. That's your 1%.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole different problem. And I tell principals all the time, lead around them.
Yep.
You lead around because you have to show the rest of your staff, the other 99%, you're courageous, you're worth respecting, you're worth trusting. And if you dump all your energy into the 1%,
Yep.
then you just look like a fool, quite frankly.
Honestly, yeah, that's a recent experience of mine as well, where, like I did perseverate a little bit about
Yeah.
specific staff member.
Yep.
And I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? Wringing my hands. And then I was like, wait a second, I can't drop my anchor on this. We got to keep the boat moving forward.
Exactly.
So, and I realized, like you just said, that the staff, needed everybody to move on.
So Jen,
Yes, Ann.
at the beginning of this, you were kind of like, I don't know how to get out of my own head and get out of my own way. You just answered it. So you can go back and listen to this podcast.
Right.
When you after you get done coaching somebody, but then you come back to be like, oh, am I who I?
Yeah.
You answered it for yourself, for our listeners, and for yourself.
Well, and let's actually land there for just a second. What is it? Where can you gather? I'm asking our listeners this. Where can you gather a list of all the things you do really, really well? Because this is an industry where you can do 999 things right. And the one time you misstep, that's when everybody's going to go to Facebook and with your name. That's where some teacher's going to stop speaking to you for the next decade. That's where some parent's going to, write you an email of the century. And then we forget the other 999 things. And so, whatever it is, whether you need to write it down in a journal or record yourself and listen to it on your own Notebook LM podcast, whatever, we got to remember the things we're doing right. There's so much talent and skill in educational leadership and so many people who are walking around feeling like they're not very good at it. And that to me is a travesty. We've got to tell people, my gosh, look at your fabulousness too.
Yeah, it's almost like to go back to that landscape of the minefield, whether the mines have been planted by ourselves because we have like just questions or their mines placed by other people. We need to have a flying carpet that helps us float above that. Not because we can't just like turn a blind eye to those mines, but we need something, whether like you said, something that we're writing down or some way to reflect on the positive things that we do to float above those mines.
Right.
So, Dr. Schwanke, listen, you've given us such rich moments of insight and advice and just all that kind of good stuff. Anything else for the good of the group for the Fearless Shorts podcast?
No, I just appreciate this conversation. And if I had one thing I wanted listeners to take away, I would say that, there's such a sense of urgency and honestly emergency in education. I think that's a huge mistake. There are very, very few emergencies in education. There are some, but very few emergencies. So I think it would behoove us to slow down a little and to realize that many things do not need solved right this very instant. So, let's just bring the calm and slowly get where we want to be. That's the other point too. I think there's a common phrase in education, one of them being, well, you can always get better, you can always grow, you find your why. Some of those phrases have become so cliche. Yeah. And many people need to, a lot of us need to say, you know what, I can always get better, but I'm doing well. I'm okay.
Yeah. Like you said, there are things in education that are emergencies, but sometimes we just need to emerge and see, so emerge through a situation and see what's actually there instead of being so frantic that we treat it like an emergency. And well, thank you so much for joining us on the Fearless Schools podcast, Dr. Schwanke. Appreciate it. You brought more than a cup full of educational goodness and a spoonful of sugar to today's conversation, and we are so grateful. Our recipe and our minds and our hearts are sweeter because of it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, there you go. Honestly, sincerely. Thank you. So, an audience, listen, bravo for spending time wisely with us today. And now do yourself a big time favor, right? As you bask in the warm glow of your accomplishments, subscribe to Dr. Schwanke's Principal Matters podcast, subscribe to the Fearless Schools podcast. What a dreamy combination that is. And then hop aboard the CLS train at www.creativeleadership.net. And then pack all that goodness in your old kit bag, as they say, and share it with your pals, your imaginary friends, your distant relatives, your relatives that you wish were distant, and whoever and wherever they are. So there you go. This is Dr. Drew Tomlin, keeping it short and keeping it sweet on the bright road ahead. Thanks again, Dr. Schwanke. Thanks again, Dr. Ann.
Thank you.